Hello everyone and welcome to Resident Evil Requiem. Now I do apologise getting this video out a little bit late. A lot of stuff's gone on over the past couple of weeks, but we're here and we are cracking on with it. This is a really special one because this is the first video that I'm doing for the channel that is going to be split into two parts, because with Resident Evil Requiem there is a lot to unpack and I wanted to give people a bit of time to play it for themselves, because I will be diving into spoiler territory for this video, so if you don't want anything spoiled then absolutely get off it and go play Resident Evil Requiem if you can. But this is the 9th mainline entry in the franchise and it is probably the biggest game to date that Resident Evil have put out. It's one of those games that it was such a nostalgic wave for me. It was such, it's probably my most anticipated game of 2026, with Wolverine they're going to be in a close second, and the idea of getting to go through a Resident Evil game as Leon Kennedy again, that's like so exciting. That really, the kid who grew up with Resident Evil 2 is screaming at this, and playing through this game it was a blast. And newcomer Grace, fantastic. But this is what we're all going to be talking about in the videos. So first part, we're going to be covering the first half of the game in the Renwood Hospital, and then the second part is really the Raccoon City portion of the game, and that's why I kind of want to do it in two parts, because there is a lot to unpack and there is a lot that I want to talk about, things that I liked, things that I didn't like. So buckle in, because it's going to be one hell of a ride. So thank you guys everyone for the attention that the channel's gotten. I keep on saying this every video, but it really means a lot. We're currently at 157 subscribers, and the last video I did, Resident Evil 7 and 8, has done really well, so thank you for watching that, and I'm glad people have enjoyed it. But without further ado, let's jump into the mainline entry world of Resident Evil Requiem. I'm still figuring out intros, but it's what comes with the job. So thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you all soon. Resident Evil Requiem serves as the 9th mainline entry in the Resident Evil series and is a continuation of Leon Kennedy's story, and is the beginning of series newcomer Grace Ashcroft's story. The game does take place during 2026 and does occasionally feature sections from 8 years before, and even goes as far as 1990, and these events tie in with the plot of Requiem. Grace Ashcroft is the daughter of Resident Evil Outbreak's Alyssa Ashcroft, an investigative reporter who is very protective of Grace and is determined to keep her safe. Grace is an FBI analyst who is tasked with visiting the Renwood Hotel, which is also the location of Alyssa's unfortunate demise. Let's get this out the way. The real villain of the game is not Victor Gideon, it's absolutely this guy. Imagine asking one of your employees to visit the site where a mum died. That's evil, and with how this game goes, I'm convinced he's in on the whole thing. Arriving at the Renwood Hotel, we see it's been abandoned and sectioned off from the public. We enter through the street after meeting a lovely police officer who's definitely not expendable and is here to be a threat later on, but we press on into the hotel itself. First off, I'm gobsmacked by how gorgeous this game looks, both from a character model standpoint and an environmental standpoint. When I played as Grace, I stayed in first person, and then on subsequent playthroughs I tried it out in third person, and either way it's really well done. Normally in Resident Evil Village, when you're in third person and enter a cutscene, it'll switch back to first person, and here they've integrated the third person into transitions. It's so seamless and immersive. Upon entering the hotel, we're introduced to the crime scene where Alyssa was murdered, and it looks like someone's waiting for us in room 204. We take the key, open the door, and make our way to the room, and it's here that we're treated as the first flashback section of the game. It's a shame that Alyssa's killed as fast as she's introduced, but it's something that really kicks the events of Requiem into gear, and as you can see from the get-go, this game pulls no punches. Before she's killed, she stashes a file behind a painting, and surprisingly, it's still there when we return to the present. Okay, let's get down those stairs, get that file so we can... Oh my god, what the fuck? We get the file, interact with it, and we're quickly sidetracked when the cop from earlier is acting a bit strange. He begins shooting wildly with a shotgun and gets all up in Grace's face before losing an eye and eventually being flung out the window. Here we meet Victor Gideon, the big bad of the game, and honestly one of my favourite villains in the franchise ever. More on why later. As you can see, a lot's gone down in the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game, and Capcom really don't hold back, especially when it comes to the reason why I love this game, and that's your boy, Leon Kennedy. We're introduced to an older, hardened, but still lovable Leon Kennedy, who is investigating the deaths of 6 survivors in the Raccoon City incident, all showing the same symptoms leading up to their deaths. Leon and the mysterious voice on the radio track down Victor Gideon to Renwood, and this is where our heroes heroes meet. Starting as Leon, you're quickly introduced to the Requiem, an all-powerful gun that is sent from the heavens to dispose of ne'er-do-wells. Leon's a far cry from the rookie you control in Resident Evil 2 and has learned a few new tricks, and yes, of course, a few new one-liners. Leon's gameplay is pure action, whereas Grace's is survival horror, and you can see where the original foundation of Capcom's Resident Evil Requiem was going. Initially, this game was going to be a multiplayer game, and there are elements of this still lingering about in the game. However, Capcom decided against it, as they knew deep down that single-player storytelling and survival horror was the way forward, and I'm glad they did this. Initially, I was worried about Requiem taking the action route, as Resident Evil 6 truly left a bad taste in my mouth, and as stated in my last video, it's a terrible Resident Evil game, but a great action game. Looking back on how Capcom tackled Village, it reminded me that this approach is in good hands, and they've definitely refined it here in Requiem and cranked it all the way up to 11. The pacing of Grace's and Leon's sections is done well, and despite what feels like a small taste of what Requiem's offering there at times, I had a blast seamlessly switching between the two when advancing the story, and after we've quickly dispatched some zombies, we return to Grace and are introduced to the stalker enemy of the game, the girl. Towering well over 8 feet and blind as a bloody bat, this grotesque creature will stop at nothing to make sure that you do not make it out alive, and she isn't afraid to take out her fellow undead brethren to get to you. She's fairly easy to avoid in the first section, but when you're learning the environment and the pathing for the creature, it gets tense, and given how much of a scaredy cat Grace is initially, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by this monstrosity. When she's in the area, it sometimes gives you that alien isolation feeling in the sense of using items in the area to distract the girl, such as empty bottles. The first encounter with her did give me goosebumps, especially on insanity difficulty. Thankfully, the girl's sensitive to bright lights, and we can use certain rooms as safe rooms to stop her from coming in. When in chase, Grace does actually stumble when running, and during my insanity playthrough, she stumbled for me when trying to put the fuse in the wall, and I died, so that was fun. Nice one, Grace. Maybe use your FBI analyst skills to analyze how not to trip when running, you stupid bitch. Meanwhile, downstairs, Leon arrives at the hospital and has worn out his welcome. The hospital's on lockdown and a chainsaw-wielding doctor has arrived, and this is where we start to learn about the type of enemies that we're dealing with. This strain of the T-virus given to the enemies here at the hospital is so advanced that the victims retain an element of their previous life and grasp onto it almost as if they're fighting natural instinct. I like to think of it as something similar to The Fly or even last year's Wolfman movie. Once the instinct takes over, the humans lost, and it's a task for them to claw their way back to total control. Some enemies will patrol and turn the lights off, some will sing, some will scrub away at the blood wanting to clean, and some, i.e. this big bastard, will think that he's still a chef preparing a 5-star meal at Gusto's. Hey, Leon, you had about 3 to 5 business days to save here. What the fuck, bro?
I think I want a second opinion.
Never mind, all is forgiven. Leon waited 21 years to finally wield that chainsaw, and it felt so good operating this weapon before inevitably being forced to not use it. Leon runs into Grace and saves her from the girl before being split up by Gideon. Now Grace is all alone, and here's where the game really flexes the familiar gameplay of earlier Resident Evil games. Grace has to escape, and in order to do so, she has to find these quartz pieces for the door leading to the courtyard in the hospital, and has to navigate both the east and west wings and solve puzzles along the way in, you guessed it, Resident Evil fashion. These are some of the best puzzles I've seen in any of the games, and they were a lot of fun. Along the way, we meet a blind girl called Emily, who Grace immediately feels maternal over, and we have to get her out of the hospital as she's clearly some sort of test for the experiments that Gideon has going on at this hospital. I forgot to mention, Leon, a 200+ pound man, was nice enough to give Grace, a 75-pound gal, the Requiem with only 1 bullet. But I did have infinite ammo on my third playthrough, so that was nice. The game boasts one of the most terrifying enemies in the series, and they act as the Crimson Heads variant from the remake of Resident Evil 1. I present to you the Blister Heads. These act very similar to Crimson Heads both in execution and evolution. When killing a zombie, you can use an injector to permanently remove them from the area. Failing that, if you manage to get rid of their head when dealing with them, they will not return as a blister head. You can't do this with every zombie though, so keep that in mind. In order to craft items, we need blood, and thanks to this injector, we can do just that. Initially, you can only store up to 100 microsamples of blood, but you can acquire upgrades to increase it. We can also analyze samples to unlock crafting recipes such as ammo, but you do still need blood as well. So I'm convinced that Grace is an occult worshipper and taps into her devilry to conjure up tools needed. In order to get crafting recipes, you can analyze these blood vials by completing a little puzzle on the scanner. There's only a few located in the game, and you can unlock everything you need to craft almost right away here in the hospital. Speaking of upgrades, you can collect the antique coins featured from Resident Evil 7 and use them to unlock permanent health and firepower upgrades for Grace. I would recommend getting these as they're an absolute godsend, especially when doing the no heal run. Insanity switches the upgrades up and can no longer be attained this way. You can only craft the right upgrades, and that was a sure surprise. Upon getting getting upstairs and getting an ID tag for certain areas, we're introduced to this big meatball of an enemy known as Chunk. Chunk is a gluttonous enemy who can just about maneuver through the halls of the hospital and does require some thinking in order to get around him, as he loves to block your way at important moments. You can use 3 injectors on him to permanently remove him, making traversal easier, and on a first playthrough I would recommend it, as it can take a lot of bullets to get rid of him. Once you've got unlimited ammo though, fire away. Once we've gained this ID tag, we can collect one of the items needed for progression, and that is the medical box, which stores an artificial set of lungs in it. This is also one of my favourite puzzles, and I don't know why. Before we can leave the garage, however, this zombie rocks up out of nowhere and wants to crush you in his cool new digger that he's got. One lucky shot to the face and it stops him from killing us in a really gruesome way. The deaths in this game can be some of the goriest that the series have ever produced, rivaling Dead Space and Alien vs Predator for stylish gore. I don't really have that many for Grace, but for Leon, damn. The first 2 pieces of quartz were easy to find, and after an encounter with both singing zombies and a boss who's really highlighting what a piece of shit he was, we run into Victor Gideon again, and oh my god, this dude is one creepy son of a bitch. Once we manage to get both of the artificial heart and lungs, we return this body in an operating room and insert them. Once the zombie's dispatched though, we can collect the second ID tag needed to get the 3rd quartz piece. Sadly though, it's all in Braille, and we need Emily. Is Emily a Chekhov's gun? She could be. Here's an interesting mechanic. We're carrying Emily to the 3rd puzzle piece because she'll be able to get it for us. And after we've defended her while she does that, our celebration's cut short as the girl returns and kidnaps Emily. By doing this, the game raises so many questions as to who or what the creature is, considering Leon unloaded 4 Requiem rounds into her and killed her. And given that Grace is slowly overcoming her fear, she jumps down into the hole after the creature to rescue Emily. There's a reason that this is going to be 2 parts, by the way. Like I said, there is a lot to unpack. In the meantime, we switch back to Leon and he escapes Victor, giving him a roundhouse kick that makes Victor's life flash before his eyes. Controlling Leon again, we exit the attic and run into Chunk's brother, Chunk 2 Electric Boogaloo. He operates the same as Chunk, with a few different features, but all in all still tackled the same. Leon's relentless in his firepower, and utilising the hatchet during this fight is the key to killing Chunk's brother. There is absolutely no need for Leon to be doing this at the age of 49, but I'm not complaining. When we get back into the hospital, you can either head straight for Gideon's office or run around and clean up any of the remaining zombies that you may or may not have dealt with as Grace. The fear isn't really there for Leon, and the game does a good job of showcasing that. It makes sense for Grace to be terrified, but not Leon, especially after all the shit that goes down for him in Resident Evil 4 and onwards. The hatchet's a handy tool for Leon as he can open warped doors with it and can also parry most attacks. You occasionally have to sharpen it, but it's not that big of a deal if you need to, as it happens fairly quickly. One gripe I do have that I'm going to mention now is the use of the item box in the game. Grace's gameplay features the traditional item box used before and allows you to store items and weapons you may or may not want to have on you, whereas Leon is kind of stuck with what he has. Granted, he has a lot more space and the game does kind of push you to sell things for credits, but it just didn't sit right with me. Resident Evil 4 had a very similar mechanic, but at least you could store items in between missions rather than just outright sell them.
Well, that's my cardio for the week.
Oh, Leon, you saucy bitch. After encountering a lot of blister heads, we managed to get into Victor's secret little office and discover what's going on, and why Leon's investigating the deaths of the Raccoon City incident survivors. Leon and a returning Sherry Birkin are exhibiting symptoms of the T-virus, and it's been laying dormant in their bodies for a long time, and has since activated and is slowly killing them, initially starting off as bruising on the hands and progressing all over the body before eventually killing them. We learn about something called Elpis throughout this portion of the game, and we still don't really know what it is, and we don't know whether it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. Time's running out for Leon and he's currently on stage 2 of 4 of the virus, and the game does a good job of raising the stakes for both Sherry and Leon. There are elements of finality in the game, and when we reach the end of the full review in part 2, I will give my 2 cents on where I think this IP is headed. Switching back to Grace, we managed to locate Emily in a prison cell underneath the hospital, and I have to obtain 3 jump plugs in order to get her out. The fear well and truly kicks it up a notch here, as this area is just covered in darkness, and with the girl walking around we have to be extra careful. The joint plugs can be used to turn on the lights and stop the girl from chasing you. Bear in mind though, she's not the only threat in this area, as we have zombies here too. You can pick up empty bottles and use them to distract the girl in order to progress, and you can also use them to lure her out of the way if she's blocking you. This will happen a lot in this section. There is a point during this section where you'll find the 3rd joint plug, however you can't leave once you pick it up, so what you need to do is reinsert it into the terminal and get round to the other side. Once we get to the other side, we drain the water and enter the process and fight for our lives as we try not to get crushed into Tesco lasagna. Once we have all 3 plugs, we grab Emily and escape into the sewers, have one last encounter with the girl, and make our way to the courtyard where a helicopter is waiting. We're coming up to the end of the Wrenwood Hospital section now, and the game's been a roller coaster so far. I had so many ideas on where this game was going to go, and a lot of the story caught me by surprise, and I went a completely different way to what I thought was going to happen. Grace takes Emily and places her in the helicopter, and and she runs off to get the key. We end up in a hidden underground lab that Gideon uses as a test site for his zombies, and after getting the helicopter key we run into Gideon again, only this time he gives us his best supervillain laugh ever. We escape with Emily in the helicopter and move on to pastures new. Psych, zombies climb all over the helicopter and we crash. Cool, right? Hey, Capcom, what have you got against helicopter pilots? Because my god, give a guy a break. Whew, okay. We're back as Leon and we have to protect Grace while she gets to the church, and it's here we use the sniper rifle.
Hello, gorgeous.
I can't prove it, but I know he's talking to me there. This felt very Resident Evil 6, and I'm oddly here for it. Leon's side of the story is a much more grounded approach to the action style the 6 boasted, at least in the first half of the game it is anyway. All I'm going to say is Leon definitely has his boulder punch moment later on. After popping all the zombies' heads, we can jump down and get my second favourite one-liner in the game.
Excuse me.
Swiftly enter the church and encounter a new enemy type known as the Blisterborn. These pustulous zombies have boils on them, and when you shoot them they release spores that turn regular zombies into blister heads, and it's very reminiscent of the bloaters from Last of Us. They're not too hard to deal with, but it's best to focus on the blister heads when they're here, as if you do get overwhelmed you will die a painful death. Leon, if you didn't know already, is just one badass dude, and this portion of the game highlights his best trait, how protective he is and how much he's willing to do the right thing to keep the people he loves safe. For the last portion of Renwood, Grace is finally going to deal with the girl for good. Emily unfortunately is gravely injured and is running out of time. In order for Grace to deal with the girl, we need to unleash the light on her. We enter the bottom of the platform and engage 3 switches in order to open the roof. This section was a blast to play, and it was even better on Insanity. The girl ambushes you at every chance she can, and it was a very fun but very scary game of cat and mouse. We managed to get the power on, flick the switch and melt the girl away into a pool of goop.
Ah, the light.
And that's it. That's the end of the girl, and we soon find out exactly who or what she is. We return to Emily and find she's succumbed to her wound. Grace grieves her, but is unfortunately cut short as Emily revives and violently mutates into the Dread from Dead by Daylight. Leon shows up and promptly shoots her while ignoring Grace's pleas. So it turns out the girl was in fact Emily's friend, Marie, who mutated and escaped, and this explains the hole in the wall in the cell next to Emily, and also explains the poor unfortunate soul viciously mauled in the area. She wasn't taking Emily to feed on her or kill her, she was taking her to protect her, and it was tragic as hell. That was a moment that I absolutely loved, however, it gives me a glaring plot hole that I will address in part 2. Grace, heartbroken, throws the Requiem at Leon and leaves. Running into Gideon, and after being gaslit to fuck, we're introduced to a new mystery character known as Zeno, who looks an awful lot like another Resident Evil character. A helicopter approaches and takes them to their next destination. Leon collapses to the ground as his infection begins to take hold. Knowing he's running out of time, he has to save Grace. He revs up his Porsche and heads to the one place he knows he will get answers to what's going on. After 28 years, he's going home. After 28 years, he's going to Raccoon City. It's crazy to me that Renwood Hospital acts as almost like the Spencer Mansion of the game. Like, the first half feels very Resident Evil 1 in terms of aesthetic, and then once we get to the next area of the game, which we're going to be talking about very soon, it just immediately shifts to like Resident Evil 4 onwards, and the game is a solid marriage of both the survival horror presence in the first 3 games, and then you've got the action in the series from that point on, so 4, 5 and 6. This game is great, and I can't wait for you all to see part 2 coming up later this week. So thank you guys for watching part 1. Keep an eye out for part 2 later on this week, and I'll see you then. Thanks guys.